What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports podcast, per usual. Yesterday, I had announced that I was going to bring this episode to the listeners and viewers of the show, and I had planned on it, but got sidetracked with some side matters, and now I am live. Now I am live, bringing you my thoughts on Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin 2, which will take place on Cinco de Mayo. This was news in the sport of boxing that was announced a few weeks ago, and I just felt the need to kind of let my opinion formulate rather than, sinking my teeth into it right away. Sometimes, in the words of, journalism today, they say it's better to be thorough than be first, and I don't want to be first. I want to be somebody that comes at certain sports topics with an honest, clear-cut, thought-out take, and that's kind of the mantra of this show. Everyone tries to be first. I try to be as thought-out and as thorough as I can possibly be. So, want to talk about this fight because this is the biggest fight in boxing in 2018. This was the biggest fight in boxing for the sport of boxing rather than, pay-per-view talk and stuff. For the sport of boxing, Canelo versus Triple G 1 was a great fight. Now, I want to take a step back and talk about that time of that fight, where I was at as far as my expectations for the fight. So, Canelo versus Triple G was a fight that I was looking forward to for about 4 or 5 years. A fight that many boxing fans were looking forward to, a fight that many combat sports fans were looking forward to. And oftentimes, I always refer to myself as a combat sports fan. I've been a combat sports commentator. I've done combat sports writing on both sides of the coin, mixed martial arts and boxing. And what we've come to find out, especially since the Mayweather-McGregor fight, is that neither sport is its own island. They're actually they're on one island. They're one big pie rather than pieces of a pie. So that's been a huge breakthrough in the sport of combat sports in terms of boxing and or MMA. They're just forms of combat. So when the Triple G and Canelo fight was going on, it was in September. It was after the Mayweather-McGregor stuff. Many boxing quote-unquote experts, pundits, Dan Rafael, Teddy Atlas, all these guys, Max Kellerman, they thought that Canelo versus Triple G wouldn't perform as well in terms of pay-per-views. It performed great, not as well as Mayweather-McGregor. It performed on its own. It stood on its own as a decent pay-per-view, of course. So I bought the pay-per-view. I want to preface all my statements in this edition of the Thomas Take by saying I bought the pay-per-view. I wanted to see this fight. Had the buddy of mine, Eric, over, who has been a co-host on this podcast with me a time or two, half a dozen times, I'd say. And it was a great fight. No doubt about it. The fight was fantastic. The fight was great. It was thrilling. It was entertaining. It was a great fight. But when a fight is over and the wrong hand is raised, or neither fighter's hand is raised and it is ruled a draw, after watching one man virtually dominate another for the majority of the fight, that takes the flavor out of the next fight. That takes a lot away from the next fight. And that's where I'm at with Canelo versus Triple G. That is where I am at. I am very excited for the fight. I think it's a great fight for boxing. I think it was the right thing to do. It was the right rematch. It was the right angle to go. The right avenue to take to have these guys fight each other. Outside of that, I can't feel as if I am so elated about this fight when the first one ended so poorly. I just can't. A part of me wants to be like, hey, let the past fight be in the past. That was the first one, but I already know what's going to happen in the second fight. What will happen, Triple G will do what he did very much to much success in the first fight. He will land hard punches. He will stick and move. He will force Canelo to work. And he will win rounds. And even so, Canelo might do better the second time around. He should do better the second time around. Oftentimes in combat sports history, when the younger fighter fights an older fighter, the younger fighter usually wins or does better than he did in the first fight. And I expect that. I think we will see Canelo get another ridiculous, lopsided decision. Even if it's right that he gets the decision, it will be so completely one-sided. Let's just say if it's a 12-round fight, let's just say if it's a 12-round fight, Canelo will be gifted 10 rounds, 9 rounds, 8 rounds, when really he'd only won maybe 7 or 8. Or we'll say maybe 9, 10, or 11 rounds the judges will give him when really he only won 7 or 8. That is what I expect for this fight. And it's terrible because in the case of boxing, I want boxing to succeed. I want boxing to make the comeback that it deserves. I want boxing to become relevant again, great again. I want boxing to do well. But the reality is boxing has put themselves in this position where you only have 1 or 2 major super fights in a year, maybe 3. No one is being built over a span of time. What is happening is fighters are just being built off of each other or off of big names of years past. Canelo, his one loss to Floyd. Triple G really should have broke onto the scene a lot sooner than he did, and I think that's the downfall of his career. The fact that he's fighting in this major fight versus Canelo as a mid-30s, fighter, moving on to his late 30s. That's the biggest shame of Gennady Golovkin's career, because had he gotten his fair shot against the biggest names earlier, maybe he wouldn't be fighting right now, or maybe he would be more revered than what he is, and he's already one of the greatest fighters of his era. I think he's the pound-for-pound number 1 fighter on planet Earth, boxer on planet Earth, and there is a difference. So, all that being said, I'm really excited for this fight, but if someone asks me, knowing what they know now, will I buy it on pay-per-view? No, I will not buy it on pay-per-view, because buying these fights on pay-per-view has only left people disappointed. The Mayweather-McGregor thing was a huge spectacle. They knew they were going to get everyone's money. They did. Virtually everyone's money they got. They got everyone's money, but at the end of the day, what we expected to happen happened. Did Conor throw some wrinkles in it? Yeah. With Canelo and Triple G, did we get our money's worth? Yes, but did we feel robbed at the end? Yes, because the outcome was highly corrupt. Corrupt, shady, despicable for Adelaide Byrd to score that fight 118 to 110, and that's why we're where we are. Boxing needed this rematch, but it almost appeared as if it was fixed for the rematch. It was like, well, we can't have this fight just once. We got to have it twice, maybe even 3 times. And usually when 2 fighters fight once, one fight's a draw. Sometimes they fight even 4 times. In the case of Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez, they fought 4 times in the squared circle. So it's just, I can't, I've lived through that. I've watched all that, the Pacquiao era, the Mayweather era, how things were so shadily done to Manny Pacquiao, even dating up until this past year versus Jeff Horn. I almost said Jeremy Horn. Jeff Horn. Jeremy Horn was a UFC fighter back in the day. Jeff Horn did not win that fight. And anyone that says he did win that fight, you're out of your mind. I mean, it's just that simple. So I want to see boxing make the comeback. I want to see boxing do well. When boxing's doing well, it's good for everybody. But to say that it is in good hands with this rematch is a mistake. It's a huge mistake. Based on how the first fight ended, it almost appeared to me as if the first fight was only ending this way so that a rematch could happen. More money for everybody type thing. Well, if this happens, if we do it this way, if this happens and this is the result, this is more money for this person. If this happens and we go this way, it's more money for this person. It's scummy. It really is. And the boxing fans deserve better. The diehard boxing fans, the boxing purists deserve better. I was looking at pay-per-view numbers dating back to 2006, and there's this common, argument, debate point where people say, well, boxing has been on top, up until recently the UFC started to take over. That's actually not true. You go back to 2006, there were 10 pay-per-views. 9 of the top 10 pay-per-views were UFC. They have dominated the pay-per-view market for the better part of the last decade. And boxing is just starting to realize it. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was a Thomas Take. Take care.